We are going live and we are broadcasting. There we go. Here. All right, everybody. Thank you to everyone who is just joining in with us this evening. My name is Anna Kaplan. I am president of the nonprofit Women Leaders in Cannabis, and I am joined this evening with an incredible group of individuals from our community. To tell you just a little bit about Women Leaders in Cannabis, we are a 501c6 nonprofit that we focus on empowering and educating women within the cannabis space. And we have been focusing on doing a panel which is featured on cannabis and social justice. This is the second segment of our three-part series, which is a focus on community resources. I just want to remind everyone that as we are joined by so many incredible nonprofits this evening, that we actually do feature a nonprofit each quarter. This quarter, we are featuring the New Leaf Project, whose mission is to build intergenerational wealth via the legal cannabis industry for communities disproportionately harmed by cannabis criminalization. That's Black, Indigenous, Latinx communities. New Leaf Project's programs are designed to increase success outcomes for people of color in the cannabis industry, either as business owners or high-earning professionals. You can donate to New Leaf Project on our website or direct at newleafproject.org. So, thank you again for joining us. This segment of our series is Cannabis and Social Justice, our Community Resources Panel, where we're talking about what it means to defund or divest from police and instead invest in community resources, and how are the nonprofits currently in our communities working to provide necessary services and to invest in Black and Brown communities and create equity. And so joining us this evening, we have an incredible host of nonprofits that we've had the honor to support and work with over the last 5 years. I'm going to quickly go through and introduce everyone on our panel. We have Lisa Arkin, the Executive Director of Beyond Toxics, Jose Soto Gates, Fundraising Associate and Crisis Worker at Cahoots Whitebird, Tim Black, Consulting Coordinator and former Program Coordinator for Cahoots Whitebird, Chris Hannigan, Crisis Admin Representative and Grant Writer from Cahoots Whitebird, Elaine Walters, Executive Director of Trauma Healing Project, Sue Sierra Lupe, Program Director of Occupy Medical, and Mackenzie Neve Flame, Outreach Coordinator and Herbal Team Lead at Occupy Medical. I also have the privilege to introduce you to two members of the Women Leaders in Cannabis Board, Wendy Minty, who's joining us on the back end this evening, who will be taking your questions. Please hold all of your questions, or you can submit them during the panel, but we'll be asking the questions till the end. So please submit them to her via the Zoom link or direct in the YouTube live stream. And then I'm also pleased to introduce Catherine Gabbert, who is also co-moderating this panel with me this evening. Catherine is the founder of Kind HR Consulting. She previously sat on our board as our advocacy and outreach coordinator, and she's currently the sitting vice president and our director of philanthropy. She comes to the board with extensive background in social work and served as board member and program developer with several local nonprofits. As you guys can see, I speak very quickly. So thank you for following along as I ramble through this introduction. And we're so happy to get started. So I believe we want to start off our panel by going through and introducing each organization. So Catherine, I'm going to let you take it from here, and we're going to go through the panelists we have to tell us a little bit about the work you're doing. And Catherine, you're on mute.
You will all come to appreciate that feature later. So I would like to start out with our friends from Occupy Medical and give them the floor for just a couple of minutes to tell us who they are and what they've been doing.
Okay, well, Mackenzie, I guess I'll get started. Occupy Medical, as you guys probably know, is a free clinic here in Eugene and now in Springfield. We have our usual clinic, which is near Mackenzie Willamette Hospital every Sunday still, after all these years from 12 to 4. We also have a Wednesday clinic under the bridge, which Mackenzie will talk about. And we have an outreach team, which Mackenzie will talk about. And we also have a contract with FEMA and Lane County Public Health for the FEMA COVID recovery site, which is at 100 River Avenue. Go, Mackenzie.
So something that's really great about Occupy Medical is that it was founded in part by a local herbalist, Miss Sue Lupe, our fearless leader. So it's an integrative health clinic. So it's not only free for anybody that shows up, but anyone is also able to access a doctor, nurses, foot care, wound care, and clinical herbalism, which we are able to give away for free through myriad, very generous community and national connections that we have. So we are also able to give out things like multivitamins and supplements to keep people well. So that's something that's pretty unique about our clinic that I really appreciate, and how I got involved. The outreach and the outdoor clinic are the most recent additions. They're sort of recent additions. They're definitely part of the heritage of Occupy Medical. Occupy Medical started outdoors in the Occupy movement 10 years ago. I don't know, something. They started outdoors. We were able to get a building with interestingly, when COVID hit, we moved back outside and really amped up our outreach to make sure that we were really finding people who were attempting to shelter in place outside during the pandemic. So I coordinate the outreach and wraparound services, which we also have a generous grant through OHA that we're working to develop to specifically help people who are affected by COVID or trying to isolate and quarantine throughout the community. We serve anybody, where our model is for healthcare for all. But through our outreach services, we're really attempting to get out and find the people that are hardest to find and are attempting to shelter in place outside.
And as a quick note, one of the reasons why we put a lot more focus into the outreach team and to our Wednesday clinic is because during COVID, some other services were shut down, and we realized that we needed to serve more people, not fewer. And outreach is one of the ways we were able to do it in a COVID prevention protocol friendly manner.
Catherine, you're muted.
Here I am. All right.
You're still muted. You must have hit the button twice.
I'm pretty much the worst moderator ever. I should have captions for myself. Okay. So, Mackenzie and Sue, thank you so much. I'd like to hear next from Elaine, Healing Project.
Yes, and I'm actually going to hide my face just for a minute and walk to a better connection. So if you just give me a split second to do that without making you dizzy. All right, I think that will be better. So the question is just a little bit about our organization and what we do. So we have been around about 15 years. We actually formed as a group of survivors and community partners a response to trauma that we thought wasn't happening at the time. There were folks involved that a majority of people involved have always been survivors of trauma, sort of leading the way. And so we started out really spending a lot of time learning ourselves about different approaches to healing trauma and actually understanding the impact of trauma on individuals and communities. In Eugene and Springfield, really, we have an urban Lane County focus and have the whole time. And so we really started out as an educational awareness raising project. I mean, it's named project for a reason. And we hope that it's a community-wide project. We did end up forming a nonprofit infrastructure to support the work that we were doing and being asked to do. And since that time, we have done training and consultation work really with thousands and thousands of people in Lane County and beyond. And we started in 2012 when we were in the old Heron Center building on North Coburg. There were just these beautiful physical spaces within the building that sort of called out to us to fill them with people. And so in addition to having space for trainings, we put a cork floor in one of the rooms and started offering complimentary and traditional resources for folks who wanted to do healing on themselves. But we also had a space for practitioners and providers who wanted to learn better how to work with survivors of trauma and how to really specialize and hone their skills. And so we've had this very reciprocal sort of amazing group of practitioners, healing arts practitioners, using many, many different modalities, want to work out of our space and connect with survivors that come seeking support and healing opportunities. We've had a social justice focus since the very beginning. We have taught and learned about the intersection of trauma and oppression, and also the work of healing as a path to liberation and social justice from the very beginning. And we are clearer than ever that that the intersection of healing and activism is kind of where we want to spend our days and spend our time. And in particular, supporting the health and well-being of community activists who are working for social justice. So we've really taken up that work more directly lately. And we are now on the corner of 11th and Charnelton, at least through April, when they relocate, when they tear down the building that we're in, but we're right downtown. So we've been there for almost 3 years now, and it's been a very big change to what we're doing. And of course, in COVID, our ability to see folks one-on-one and in person has really shifted. So we are doing almost everything we're doing online now. With lots of contact with survivors in our community and beyond, as well as caregivers and folks who serve them. That's what we do.
Thank you, Elaine. That was beautiful, as usual. Very nicely put. Lisa Arkin, Beyond Toxics. I would love to hear from you what you and your organization are working on in the community.
Thank you, Catherine. And it's really awesome to be here tonight with this amazing panel. So Beyond Toxics came about when a group of top-notch environmental conservation organizations realized there was a gap in the way we were working with environmental protection. And so about 20 years ago, that gap was identified as no organization really working deeply in community to address pollution and how that impacts our bodies, our well-being, and our health. And so we have been an environmental justice organization, the oldest one in the state. We have a great multi-generational and diverse staff working throughout the state. And our office is in Eugene, and we have a special affinity to serving the West Eugene community because they are living kind of in the bowl of an industrial circle there. And we've been aiding that community for many years, making sure that we have answers to why there's higher rates of asthma, stroke, and cancer in that community that has been documented, and how those health problems relate to environmental health. And I was thinking about what Elaine said about healing, and thinking about how Beyond Toxics and our environmental justice focus is really about healing our relationship with Mother Nature, finding balance, recognizing the sacredness of needing to respect our air, our soils, our water, and how that is really a part of our future, a healthy future, a future for our children. And all of that, of course, related to serving frontline communities, those who are impacted the most by environmental destruction and environmental pollution burdens. So our mission is really to advance the leadership of frontline communities in this work. We have taken the lead on a number of issues in our state, from the use of pesticides. Sometimes we're well known for our work in trying to stop aerial herbicide sprays in forested communities that, of course, then influence our drinking watersheds and the safety of the water. We've taken on air polluters, so we very much are dedicated to dismantling a sort of corporate industrialized complex that gives a lot of power to polluters and takes power away from communities. So we work hard to make sure that the communities we serve, the frontline communities of color, Black and Brown people, our Indigenous and Native communities are foremost in decision-making and have a say in what's even being talked about at the table, as well as the decisions that come from those tables. So that means we take our work up from community-based right up to the state legislature, and we work on long-lasting policy issues that will make this state both a leader in environmental health and to protect those communities that are currently burdened by unnecessary industrial pollution. So I'll stop there.
I remembered myself this time. I look forward to talking with you later about how your organization was able to affiliate with the NAACP as well. My understanding is that there is a Beyond Toxic NAACP relationship. And so when we're talking about how we've moved into relationships, particularly nationally, I look forward to hearing from you how that happened. So thank you very much, Lisa. And Cahoots Whitebird, we saved the best for last. That's not true. You guys are all really great. But Cahoots Whitebird has been in the news, and we've heard a lot about your work, and especially when it comes to defunding and divesting the police, and what it would look like for all of our community organizations to be able to participate in the community. And you guys are really leaders in this space. So I would love to hear from whoever from Whitebird wants to speak, all of you, some of you, definitely not none of you, and tell us what that looks like. Tell us about your work.
So Whitebird Clinic has been serving our community here in Eugene and Springfield for 50 years now. We got our start in the winter of 69, 1970, right around the same time as this kind of little festival thing that happens outside in, Veneta now. At the time, a lot of the same issues that we were seeing in larger metropolitan areas were occurring in Eugene. The impacts of deinstitutionalization at the hands of the Kennedy and Nixon administrations, being about an hour away from the state hospital, being on the I-5 corridor, almost exactly halfway between San Francisco and Canada, right? Eugene with Ken Kesey, we were just becoming a magnet for all of these same, kind of same social issues that were occurring in a lot of other communities. And our founders were really dissatisfied with the traditional approaches, the systems that were in place to attempt to respond to that level of need. And we're seeing how inadequate those services really were. To really understand what was being done differently in other communities and to really, take that opportunity to learn. Our founders spent time in San Francisco at the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, meeting with Dr. Smith, volunteering, providing services, and really learning about that approach. Our founders also spent time with Central City Concern up in Portland to really understand what, the largest city within a couple hours of us was doing. And from those lessons, we came back here to Eugene and started what we called the Whitebird Socio-Medical Aid Station. As soon as we started answering a crisis line from our founders' living room, before we even had a brick and mortar location, we were hearing about situations where a phone-based intervention was going to be appropriate, and there was a need that was larger than what could be met with a drop-in center. We needed to be able to actually meet people where they were at, out in the community, and referencing, I think, kind of where our mindset was and where were culturally, when those situations were occurring, our staff were calling that the bummer, and that there needed to be, we called it the bummer squad. We would send these volunteers out into the community to meet people where they were at, to come into their homes, to meet them in the streets, where they were, to really provide services for them. we got to tinker with what that community-based crisis response looked like for about 20 years, while we also built up the programming that Whitebird Clinic now offers today. One of the things that we really did during that kind of first 20 years of our presence in the community was really to establish ourselves as a resource to divert folks from the emergency room when they're experiencing behavioral health crises, when they were experiencing crises related to addiction or poverty. And we started to see, you look in the crisis logs, even in the early 70s, that law enforcement from Junction City, from Springfield, from Cottage Grove were bringing people to Whitebird Clinic because they knew that this would be a more therapeutic response. This would be a more trauma-informed environment than just taking them to the hospital. So we got to really build trust with public safety and demonstrate that we could support diversion from those traditional systems, that we had this opportunity to keep folks out of criminal legal involvement and out of that emergency system, just that revolving door. That trusting relationship with public safety was what really allowed us to develop the Cahoots program. The Cahoots program got its first shift on July 4th of 1989 in a retired ambulance with a couple of old police radios. We have spent the last 30 years really kind of growing that program, and we'll save that for a totally other panel to really kind of talk about the just Cahoots, but really looking at Whitebird Clinic as a whole. We have really always tried to remain a client-centered organization that is trauma-informed, and we operate as a consensus-based collective. Now, as a fairly qualified health center in 2020, we have a whole host of services, and I'd love to give Jose an opportunity to touch on all of the different programming that we have to offer our community.
Thanks. Thank you, Tim. Yes, I have a list actually here on my computer that I'm going to pull up so that I don't leave anything out. So our Front Rooms program has been kind of the reception of the organization. And during COVID times, our Front Rooms program, which normally helps people to have an address to receive mail. We have a eye clinic program where we provide free glasses and eye appointments for folks in the Front Rooms. People can use the bathroom, get clothing, receive medical supplies, and just basic kind of hygiene supplies there. We also provide assistance accessing health insurance. We have a program and a grant that help people to get their birth certificates. We have a whole program that's designated to providing pretty intensive case management services to folks who have difficulty navigating life, navigating remembering when to be somewhere and where to go. They have a van. They can go out to someone's camp. They can pick them up. They can take them to an appointment. They can stay there and advocate for them. The NEST program has been kind of like a really cool resource that's kind of developed as a need within our organization that allows our case managers to float between programs and to help clients access different services as needed. We also have a program that helps people to access SSI services. We have the Cahoots team. We developed the help book. A lot of organizations are familiar with the help book because they utilize it in order to provide information referral to their clients. We run a 24-hour crisis hotline. We were integral in responding to the Holiday Farm fire. And we're still providing emergency lodging services to folks. We have a counseling program. We have drug and alcohol services. We have a dental clinic, a medical clinic, and then we have event medicine. And event medicine, normally we're the ones that are providing crisis services and medical care at festivals that folks attend. In COVID times, we've also responded to providing medical care at protests and providing crisis support to folks at protests. And I think maybe, I don't know if Christiana has anything to add that I might have missed.
No, I think you covered. Did you mention dental?
Dental, yes.
Yes. We also have a safety net dental clinic and traditional counseling program and outpatient substance use treatment program that uses a harm reduction model that's a little bit different, and a good fit for people who may not be engaging with other types of treatment.
So yeah, the cool thing is someone may access services to Whitebird through like the Cahoots program, but find out that their dental needs and their medical needs and their drug and alcohol support needs and their counseling needs can all also be met at Whitebird. And like I said, our COVID distribution site passes out tents, jackets, clothing. They have a lot. We've actually just had so much great support from our community. There's been such a huge response that we actually have rooms of supplies that we're giving. I mean, we gave out 150 tents in 3 days. And so the need is out there. People are definitely like benefiting and utilizing the things that people are bringing to Whitebird and allowing us to distribute to community members who need them.
Thank you, Cahoots Whitebird, all of you, for that. That was a lot. That's all of this is a lot. We have some champions in this community who are, I mean, this is how we can talk about defunding the police. This is why this is not a foreign concept to us, because we have been blessed to have services and people fighting for things. And it's exciting. And I hope that this, this podcast and also just everything that we, are all collectively doing is getting out to the rest of the country as, proof that it's possible. So thank you. We're going to move into the questions here. This is a really good time to talk about, since we were already kind of on the subject, the murder of George Floyd. Within 24 hours of May 25th, 2020, it was clear that the persons responsible for the death of Mr. Floyd would not be held accountable. And this was the day it all began. We had been dealing with COVID, and then there was this. And I'd really be interested in hearing what happened next in your organizations, how you responded, and did this change your mission or approach? The kind of rapid changes that were happening around that date and that event. What did that look like for you? So you guys are on a free flow. You decide who speaks and we'll listen.
Yeah, right away, mainly our herbal team, but also we tapped into some of our nursing staff and our provider staff. We mobilized protest medics, a team of almost 13, and coordinated some with Whitebird around doing protest support right away. We rolled out for almost 30 straight days here in Eugene, supporting all levels of protest, and we saw right away, escalating police violence, and sort of at the same time as that, we also saw tangential violence among our unhoused neighbors who we had already been serving. We were familiar with a lot of them, and so we quickly sort of also diverted to doing a lot more outreach. So we were moving out in protest, and we were also moving out to check on people who were seeing escalating police violence just in their everyday, even though sweeps shouldn't have been happening, they were happening. Just people were really on edge with the use of chemical weapons. We saw unhoused individuals and unhoused neighbors who were experiencing sort of tangential injury from that, and that was part of also the reason that really spurred us to get back outside again and be underneath the Washington Jefferson Bridge, which was a location that we had been at 3 years prior. So while we really only had the one team, we started making a lot of connections within the activism community that was rolling out. We made new connections. We started having different conversations about how to ethically engage in this process, and were able to really provide direct support to the protesters and social justice activists.
So when Mackenzie said that sweeps aren't supposed to happen, it's because during COVID, all of those sweeps, which mean you go through and you clear out, arrest and throw away the possessions of the unhoused, The way that the police have said this is they're not doing sweeps, but if they get a complaint, then their response is they're responding to the complaint. However, the action is exactly the same. So bringing in bulldozers and destroying camp chairs. They say they're putting things away, but I'm not sure putting things in a dumpster is considered putting things away. So that sort of thing, imagine yourself having to start over your entire life because your house is demolished every couple of weeks. If you just imagine for a second what that looks like, that has a pretty stunning effect on the cycle of poverty that we see in this country. So that's what she's talking about when she mentions it.
This is Elaine. So this question, at first I just felt like I was swimming in the question, but I think it was, it actually, what happened to us and what happened to our organization is that we absolutely turned in first. That we're very small. We have 6 staff and most of us are part-time. And people are very devoted in their very specific ways to healing and social justice. And it hit us like a ton of bricks. I think we had to do our own grieving and really acknowledge the level of sort of heartbreak that we were already dealing with in the face of COVID and the disconnection and the isolation and separation. And sort of turn in first. And then we kind of carried that theme through the way we've been working. It's really interesting to think about the number of organizations that have turned out to face and receive and serve sort of more directly the activists, the protesters, the folks being targeted for all kinds of violence and mistreatment. And we actually kind of went underground in a way and started reaching out to our provider and our first responders. And so one of the things that we launched and had launched before, but really actually amped up around the protests and then also around the fires, is outreach to first responders and to people who were on front lines in different ways to provide sort of grief support and emotional support and regulation support. Because what we were seeing is that people were not just sort of acting out in the community and being very reactive and overreactive. We were actually seeing and hearing about workers in a wide variety of human services organizations kind of struggling with each other, intensified conflict among coworkers and irritations that would be irritations now kind of blowing up, people feeling a lot of shame and embarrassment and being frozen. So basically reaching out to folks that were having trauma activations in the workforce. And so a lot of where we focused is really on sort of building those caring connections. I don't think we changed our mission, but I think we also have become much more direct in the way we talk about the intersection of trauma and racism and the intersection of trauma and all forms of oppression in every group, in every training, in every gathering that we've hosted, really beginning way back, but also just really intensifying and getting much more blatant and much more visible in the ways we invite people to consider their role in both the perpetuation of systems of oppression and also in their potential for doing their own private personal healing work and collective interpersonal relationship work in ways that facilitate better responding and better activism. One of the things that we have noticed for a long time is the struggles that happen along really artificial oppression-based divisions within activist communities. So people with lived experience versus people who are allies, people who have particular identities sort of at odds with people with identities of people in the oppressor roles, and the ways we can in our direct activism work get divided from each other based on racism and anti-Semitism and homophobia and sexism and all of the isms, and what it is it's our internalized sort of response to this basically attack on our communities, and then we don't know what to do with that, so we kind of turn on each other. And so we've been really bringing that up and developing processes and conversation supports around helping people think about their own positions in all of that, as directly as we can. Yeah.
That is a great segue into the question about organizations that have been providing training for employees and management that are specific to the things that you just mentioned, the isms, and of course the diversity, equity, and inclusion, pieces that I feel like really kind of fell into the community scene and across the country, where, suddenly these words weren't just being spoken about, in HR meetings. It was suddenly something that needed to be spoken of, almost instantaneously. So talk about your organization's training that has been specific to employees and management, and whether you feel that has been impactful.
Is the question specific to the way we've worked with our own management and our own employees?
Yeah, and I think we could take this question a little bit further and, talk about the training that you've been asked to provide in the community as well. But really just kind of, in addition to the work that the organization is doing, I know that there were a lot of calls to local organizations about services that they could provide within the community, like the ones that you were just speaking about, Elaine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just finish by saying that one of the things that we have done lately that, we've been working with Whitebird for many years. Our trauma-informed care trainings have always included crisis de-escalation in partnership with Whitebird. And when the pandemic hit, we needed to sort of make things shorter. And so we actually separated and started hosting the crisis de-escalation trainings. And more of those trainings have focused on addressing some of the things happening in protest movements, some of the things happening to keep people safe on the streets. And it's been a really an honor to kind of host that work with some really important wisdom around street interventions from a trauma sensitive and racial justice perspective, I think, in a lot of the way that work's been done. So thanks, Whitebird.
Thank you, Elaine. I think from our perspective, the technical support that Trauma Healing Project's been able to offer, the demand that we've been getting, not just locally for training, but nationally for consultation, has been seriously overwhelming. It's really kind of hit us pretty hard in the sense that there's like this sense of duty for folks at Whitebird to be able to help support other communities who are wanting to develop this type of model. But there's also a responsibility to our community and making sure that our programs are still able to run. We literally have a list of 450 different communities across the country that want us to consult with them on how to provide services. And if every person at Whitebird became a consultant today, we would have nothing left to provide to our community. And so the fact that we've been able to depend on the Trauma Healing for the technical support to bring our training into an online platform and provide online training to more people than I thought was even possible has just been a pretty amazing thing. I attended a training where there was over 150 people in the training. From all over the country. We had folks that were looking to have this type of discussion and this type of conversation. And so, yeah, I just really appreciate you, Elaine, and thank you for helping us to develop that, because that's something that we're moving towards, is looking at how can we continue to provide educational resources to folks while at the same time maintaining robust services here locally. Mm-hmm. And so I think the future is moving a lot of these things into online education platforms.
I would say another model of that is extending that privilege that we have as providers of healthcare, mental health, and just support in general. We get to see what happens to people that are very, very vulnerable. We are trusted with that information. And that information comes with a terrible responsibility, which means figuring out how to share that information in a way which is, of course, protected, but also that those people in power that make decisions that result in the suffering of the people that we serve, we are obliged to say something about that. So that education goes beyond our organization, and it goes up to talking to the city manager. It goes up to talking to the mayor. It goes up to talking to city council, our governor. Everyone needs to know about what happens to the voiceless people that we talk to and that we serve. And that is part of that education and training. And at Occupy Medical, I hope I have always been right there to tell people, please use your voice, use your words, protest in whatever way that you can. But we have to stop this. We have to make things better, and we can. And it's up to all of us. I think Mackenzie probably has a few things to say about that topic as well.
I think within Occupy Medical, I've also really found a community that was already really focused around, the long-standing traditions of deeply ingrained systemic oppression that are inherent within our healthcare systems. And those are conversations that are happening constantly. It's part of the reason why we show up. But in particular, since the mobilization of this most recent incarnation of the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd, those conversations have become a lot more urgent and a lot more intense. I'm seeing a lot more of our medical practitioners willing to face a huge and historic system that is perpetuating violence and oppression upon people at the same time as attempting to heal them, right? It's like such a tangled knot that is so old. And we've been having a lot of conversations about how to deepen our training around that, in particular for our providers, and how sometimes the systems that we operate within perpetuate violence. Not saying anybody has the answer, but I have found certainly amongst the community and our partners here, the Trauma Healing Project is an amazing resource. Whitebird, we're constantly referring to. I think that those conversations about how to really get in and break deep systems are really happening. Not that they haven't ever happened. I mean, it's part of the reason why all of our organizations were founded, but that, we're starting to ask ourselves really deep questions, both about our personal work and how we contribute, but also to that bigger systemic work and how we can contribute.
Thank you so much. Lisa, I would love to hear from you and hear a little bit about Beyond Toxics and the work that you're doing, especially with climate justice and racial justice.
Thank you. I was just thinking about what Mackenzie said about the work to break the systemic oppression, those systems that keep these patterns happening over and over again. And so what we did to address that was really pivot to a series of online educational tools, webinars and things that brought people of color together to speak to these issues. I think we're on our 6th one in the series now, and one of them was race and COVID-19, the role that race plays in both who is vulnerable to coming down with the disease and who's getting treatment. And again, the panel was all folks of color, including medical practitioners. And then we participated in hosting a series of webinars on just transition and the Oregon Green New Deal and energy democracy. Again, training people, lifting up their awareness to how we're going to break down these systems of oppression and have that kind of world that can be supportive of all the communities that we are serving collectively. So we're not exactly a direct service organization like so many of you, and I highly respect, admire, and am in awe of the work you all do. But we're trying to bring more people to the movement, particularly through a just transition model. And so the just transition model, 4 fronts, vulnerable frontline communities of color, communities like the one George Floyd is from, to be forefronted in decision making and helping plan out a future where systemic oppression no longer plays a role. Oh, and I just want to mention a lot of that work is together with our very close partners, NAACP and Unite Farm Worker Center from Southern Oregon, and PICUN, the Farm Worker Union of Oregon.
So I just wanted to mention, you know, at Whitebird, we're a collective model, and so we don't have like management. And so I think that kind of the response that I saw happening within our organization was kind of a realization that we were all looking at these issues from different lenses and perspectives. And I think that was difficult for a lot of people within the organization, especially when it came to just having, I think, some basic exploration conversations. You know, we have like 250 people at Whitebird, and we run on a consensus model, and getting everyone to agree on something can be really difficult sometimes. And when it came to these conversations, I think that where we've all kind of like patted ourselves on the back as like social justice warriors, I think we found ourselves like in really murky water. Because I think that there was definitely like a lot of blind spots when we're having these conversations and when we're looking at these issues. So, you know, back in June, we had a pretty immediate response. You know, I work with the crisis team, and we were already having these types of conversations. We had already created a committee, and we were exploring training for our team and expansion of our library and resources. But the collective created the Equity Council in June, and designated FTE from every department to participate in that council. Also designated funds for everyone within the collective to receive training with a training deadline of October 1st. Since then, we've also hired a consultant that has come on with us to assist us through this process and help to guide us through navigating some of these blind spots and exploring ways of addressing some of the issues that are coming up for us as a group. And I think one of the big things that we've identified as the crisis team is looking at how do we maintain relationship through these conversations and through this process, and, you know, exploring what that means for us. I think as an organization, we're looking much more at like policy and reorganization and structure, and how to impact like the institutions of racism that are existing like explicitly and inexplicitly, I think, for folks within the collective. And so it's a process that I feel like we're like kind of right in the middle of, and it hasn't been fun.
Thank you, Lisa and Jose. On that note, I think it's as you're explaining, creating the Equity Council and looking internally at how we're organized. What do you believe is the most important component of building anti-racist culture in our workplaces and our organizations as we move forward?
Well, I would just build on what Jose was saying for our organization. I sort of talked about sort of hitting this big pool of grief as individuals and in our small team, of just sort of hitting a wall that had been, you know, sort of like thawing out. And so I think we're still experiencing some murky is a good descriptor, you know, some territory where on the one hand, we need to move and we need to grow and we need to acknowledge and sort of face and look at our own sort of work, and where we have influence that we can use in anti-oppression work, and where we have our own kind of interpersonal sort of frozen spots and grieving that we still need to do. And I guess that's my long-winded way of saying I don't think we've got it figured out. I don't think we're there yet. I think we have heart and we have interest, and our staff is diversifying and our work is diversifying in many different descriptions of that word. And if I could integrate anything into the work of social justice and anti-racism sort of efforts, it would be to incorporate spaces for healing, where we get to deal with our oppressor material that we inherited sort of in really gnarly, nasty, painful ways, and look at our internalized oppression, and where we need to do our healing work, and how to create sort of within our organizational collective spaces to take care of that, and to actually do that work, and then to bring that into the wider work that's happening around social justice, to have us be able to stick together. Jose, I really like the way you said, we want to maintain relationships. Serge, I think, has a great set of principles about sort of calling people in rather than calling people out. And I think that's the work, and it's painful and it's tedious, and it requires a lot of self-reflection individually and also collectively. All of our organizations have origin stories for why we exist. And there's the places where it's in reaction to, and we're trying to do something different. And I think one of the next opportunities is for us to do the healing work needed so that we can actually create the replacement structures for what we're trying to get rid of. And I'm not sure we're clear on what that task involves. And I don't think we'll have the best picture until we clean up our material individually and interpersonally and organizationally and community wide, to vision what we want to replace this thing we need to tear down with.
I think it's really important to recognize that this isn't some sort of one and done process, where in a 4-month period, most of the staff at Wiper Clinic went through some diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and now we're good. If this, in order to really, be effective at this, we need to recognize that every day I should be confronting some component of my white cis male privilege, and that I should actively be looking for ways to break down, those systems that I benefit from, and use that privilege to amplify the voices, that are being oppressed, that are being marginalized, that are being killed, and it can be really easy for organizations, especially nonprofits here in Eugene, to say, hey, I got this thing going. We set up this program. We have done our part, and we're just going to keep going with that. The longer we allow, those systems to remain stagnant, that the ones that we've built, the less we're actually able to do to serve our community.
Beautifully said. And I think that that's a good segue into, doing this work and participating in growth within your own selves and organizations. The bigger picture, taking it back to the words defund the police, and building a new system, as Elaine said. What do you suppose in the coming years that looks like? How does that look in your mind? And obviously this could change in 3 or 6 months or 3 or 6 minutes, but what does that look like to you when we say defund the police, and what is your organization's piece of that?
So I just want to say, and Tim can talk to this more, but we've been defunding the police since 1989, and our Cahoots budget is actually a part of UPD and the city of Eugene's budget. And so I think that the model that we have there is a good one way of showing how funds can be utilized. And a more effective trauma-informed, community-based type of response.
I mean, this is a transitional process, you know, looking at the systems that we are attempting to reform with this movement. This is nothing that's going to happen overnight, you know, and when we are talking about this concept, you know, what we're talking about is not just an examination of the first responder landscape. It's really looking at how harm reduction services can be implemented to really, you know, impact and reduce the reliance on public safety, how community mediation, violence interruption, just access to the ability to meet basic human needs like sleep. Though, you know, what we're looking at is massive, but by beefing up these other systems, by allowing and empowering folks to meet their basic needs, you know, to have a sense of safety and connection to their community, you know, intrinsically, we are providing opportunity for less reliance on those traditional systems within public safety specifically. And so, you know, kind of talking about what do we see and where is our role over the next few years, it's really, you know, like I said, using our privilege to amplify the voices that are you know, most negatively impacted by these systems that are in place right now, and working together, finding those ways to collaborate with, you know, Trauma Healing Project, you know, with Occupy Medical, and, you know, and like with Beyond Toxic, you know, I think about fence line communities, you know, and that there is this complete lack of recognition of the environmental violence, you know, that so many communities are disproportionately experiencing as well. So, you know, all of our organizations really, you know, are trying to support this transitional space that we're in right now.
I want to leave room for other organizations, but just to piggyback off of that, I'm, you know, speaking about defunding the police into the future, I'm really interested to see how other communities implement their Cahoots-like projects, because each community that has decided to consult with Cahoots also has their own factors going in about how their funding works, what population they're working with. I think at least one community decided to embed the service within the fire department as opposed to being separate. And being a grant writer, I speak a lot of like funders, like what funders want to hear, which is definitely not a source of racial justice or inclusion. But looking at the data behind that of who are these programs reaching, like who's being served, how do they feel about it, and how does that relate to, you know, each department's relationship with the police? So, you know, building up community trust has been a long process for Cahoots. How is that going to work for other communities? And how will that be affected by their relationship with their respective law enforcement and community?
So this would be a really great time to talk about objectives moving forward. I mean, that's, you know, maybe kind of hard to put our finger on, but, you know, surely we've sat in some kind of strategic planning for the next year at some point, you know, during this last year. And, you know, what do you see on the horizons? What are your organizations looking at in terms of, you know, everything from when COVID ends to what happens after the election to, you know, the fact that Black lives are never not going to matter again, at least to a big portion of the population who's aware of what that means and how we need to take that forward. You know, what next, you guys?
Well, there's a lot of things that need to happen. Number one, we need to keep people housed. We've had a whole bunch of people that just lost their housing due to a wildfire. I know that because it's an epidemic, a pandemic, the governor has gone ahead and said, hey, you can't evict people. You just can't do that. It's not going to work. It's going to make the pandemic worse. Well, now it's time to say, okay, you also can't put in place and reinforce move-in fees. No more security deposits, no more application fees, no more pet fees, no more first and last month's rent. Just get first month's rent, get somebody in there. Now's the time. And if we don't do basic things like that, we're going to have a really ugly winter. We need to get people housed. We need to make sure that their housing, that their utility deposits for utilities, just give them utilities. This is a pandemic. It's an emergency. There's a whole bunch of other things that we should have. We should have public bathrooms open. We should have hot and cold running water for people to wash their hands. We should have secured sharps containers all over this community. When I was growing up, we had these things called garbage cans. The garbage cans were not hoarded. It was part of public service. Well, now you can see what happens when people hoard those garbage cans. So we need to have public service once again to serve the public, because we pay our taxes and something needs to come back to us. People should not have to suffer because they don't have anything in their pocket. You should just be treated like a person.
Thank you. It's kind of hard to follow that. I think she kind of nailed it. When going back to the question before about the defunding and disinvesting and investing, I think a good starting place in my mind has been to expand our definition of public safety, to include, to be inclusive. So public safety, meaning public health, meaning public spaces, meaning public, public safety for the public, right? And similarly for the issues around the Justice Center, if you've participated in any of the strategic plan conversations around the new Justice Center, that could actually be a Justice Center. We could fight to have a center where people could access a whole range of equity building supports and resources that would increase justice in our community. But by defining safety and defining justice as law enforcement and policing, we kind of miss, 90% of the things that we need to be paying attention to that will actually make even the most afraid among us safe, right? And so if we can expand our definition and our thinking around public safety and around safety, to include moral safety, physical safety, emotional safety, and then build around what it would take for that to be equally applied, then I think we would be actually investing appropriately, and we wouldn't have to take money away from law enforcement and away from corrections and away from prisons. We wouldn't need it there. And I actually do think we could quickly move this. I think if we began to put our resources into healing and balancing people's access to safety and security, we wouldn't need prison spaces. We wouldn't even be able to justify them, in any realm, because we would see we would see different outcomes for people and different options for people. And so we're in a state where we're kind of piecemealing changes to our legal system, and that's fine, but it would take 5 years. I think that's all it would take to actually make a big turn towards the kind of community and the kind of justice that we actually are talking about. And maybe we'd have to up the cost for a while before we disinvest or divest in anywhere. But it's obviously available because we are doing things during this pandemic and in responding to our needs that we were told 8 months ago could never be done. And we're doing it in every one of our agencies, and every one of our communities are taking actions that we have been told, working around needs for homes and needs for sheltering and safety. We've been told we can't do it, and we're doing it. I've been told that it's, well, I'll leave that to people who know more about the communities, some of the communities than I do, but we've clearly got options that we've not pursued. And I think we just put our foot down in some ways and demand that we don't get interrupted in some of the directions we're all going.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact person to attribute this quote to, but I in my reading around this work, I've come across the quote that someone said that in order for Black women's lives to matter, everyone else's lives would have to matter. Like, right, that intersectionality around the way that we prioritize people, I think has been like very much exposed, right? In the simple statement of Black Lives Matter, all the systems that are also contributing to that systemic oppression have been exposed. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing right now. We're seeing that, you know, all of these changes that we could be made they're not wishy-washy principles, they're data driven. We have numbers around how Black lives are affected by healthcare, by police violence, by, you know, social determinants of health that are related to, you know, poverty cycle, generational poverty cycles. We have all those numbers, and we've had them for a long time. So part of the national conversation that we are currently having is about science deniers, you know, like it's like a much bigger, that this movement of Black Lives Matter is really bringing to a point, like a very sharp point in our national conversation. And so part of me is really excited to finally see like some oomph put behind it. Like you were saying, Elaine, like I think that we could demand it. We could demand justice, and a certain movement is really pushing for that. And I'm hopeful at the same time that I'm feeling undone by it. But it's my hope that as we move forward, that we really do sort of see a new movement and breaking things down and rebuilding them, making that transition that we're all trying to figure out.
One of the things I'm noticing just about this gathering is how thin it can feel. Like how hard it is to sort of maintain the solidarity and the relationships that I think we have to have in place to move this ship forward in the direction we want to go. I mean, my relationships with Whitebird and with Occupy Medicine and with, you know, Beyond Toxics are very thin. Our relationships are undernourished, and I know why. I get it. And it seems to me that one of the starting points that is visible and possible is to deepen our own relationships and partnerships with each other in conscious, intentional ways, and in interpersonal, intimate ways as well. I'd love to know what other people think about that, and whether you're sort of stumbling around noticing what you're missing at the same time as where you're headed. But I'm just keenly aware of it.
No, yeah, you know, I've been thinking that this whole time, like, I don't know, like at least multiple times a week, I hand out trauma healing projects information to somebody, and I'm just like, oh, this is the person. Like, look, there she is. I've never even seen her face before. I would love to get to know this person better. And I didn't even know that you were doing some of the frontline activism. I'm just like, it's also something that we've been dealing with Whitebird. You know, Occupy and Whitebird sort of overlap sometimes in, you know, historically uncomfy ways. And the nonprofit industrial complex sort of sometimes has a tendency to create competition where there should be collaboration. And that's something that we've been brushing up against a lot. Especially with this new wave, and we've had an influx of a lot of new young blood as the COVID have sort of made some of our older people step back. It's sort of created a new rush of faces for Occupy Medical. And so we've had a lot more overlap with Whitebird, and it's been it's created, you know, new opportunities for us to sort of break down some old, you know, levels of competition, or, you know, some old, like someone said something a long time ago or whatever, back in 1989 or whatever, you know, like that we
and they're still mad. Yeah.
But what? So yeah, I mean, I think we've also had some talk about creating a coalition, around our I was just talking to Wyatt at Front Rooms about some of the overlap we've been having on outreach that we didn't even know was happening in some of our camp visits and stuff. We were talking about, we should have a monthly meeting where we all just like talk about what we're doing and share resources and figure out who's going where. So it's sometimes as simple as that, but it's hard when you're on the front line.
So you guys are on to me, because I kind of did this on purpose. You know, it's so great because we have had you as our charity partners. We know who you are, and we know what you do in the community. And I didn't imagine that you weren't already in a coalition. But it seemed to me that if all of these really powerful figures could get together and really figure out the plan moving forward, you know, I love that that could be possible, because, you know, individually, like, you're all doing very powerful things, but collectively, you know, I do feel like that that's the way forward, is as a collective, because all of you bring such brilliant points and, experiences and viewpoints, especially, to this work. And so I'm really excited to see, this. I'm glad that everyone has seen everyone else's face. I'm glad that we've had a chance to speak to each other, about our own work and about each other's work. And I think, our question moving forward when we put this panel together, was a 3-part series. And then the first part, we spoke specifically about the legislation that our own industry is trying to affect, so that our money can actually trickle down into the communities, to places where we believe it belongs, where it was supposed to belong, because that's what the laws were written to state. And taking that to the mat and saying our money isn't reaching who it's supposed to be reaching. And that's where we want it to be. And then in the second part of the panel, we wanted to see who is it supposed to be reaching, right? You guys. It's supposed to be trickling into your programs. It's supposed to be affecting, justice, things like the expungement clinics that are happening all over the state to restore justice to people who have been affected by the drug wars. That's supposed to be happening. That's where cannabis tax dollars are supposed to be going. Drug treatment, medical treatment, all of these things are supposed to be affected by our funds. So the third part of the series is going to really explore what cannabis businesses in particular have been doing to make sure that their money and their time and any philanthropy that they may be interested in doing are affecting organizations like yours. And so to close this discussion tonight, I would love to hear, what we can do. What can we be encouraging our organizations to do? What kind of philanthropy could we be participating in? Give us some material here for the next step, which is really, how do we get involved with the things that you guys are doing, and use our resources to help, in our community.
I guess one of the most obvious things is to take a look at the original bill that the voters passed a long time ago that allowed cannabis to be treated as both a medicine and as a recreation, decriminalizing it. It is still criminalized for people that are unhoused. It is still criminalized for people that shouldn't be smoking, particularly in a time of COVID. And, when you look at the bill, the measure itself, you can see that it says you have to smoke indoors. Well, you don't have it indoors, then you're automatically going to get arrested for that. And then it also says you can't turn it into a tincture. Well, if you need that medicine, but you shouldn't be smoking, for example, like let's say you have a pulmonary disease like COVID, or something like that, then you should be taking it as a tincture. So those small things could be changed. And we were promised when that measure was put forth that it would be amended to make it more accessible. And I haven't seen enough amendments to it that has affected people that are unhoused. So that would be one start. I know we've had people that have come in from the cannabis community and they brought donations in, and it's so magnificent. I think some people just had put a change jar out, or I don't know if you guys understand on your end that when you make it possible for large amounts of people to even give a nickel or a dime or something, they feel ownership of the thing that they are contributing to. So for Occupy Medical, so many people see Occupy Medical as their clinic, even though they've never been there, because they brought in some socks, or they brought in, a couple of dollars, or brand new underwear or something like that. So because of that, the message that we offer, the Healthcare for All message, that becomes their message as well. And that helps change those systematic injustices that we're all working for. Everybody feels like they're part of it, and it's in their head constantly, because some of us just always scream out about healthcare for all or other issues that are important and need to be taken care of. That's how you include people, and you guys are part of that. So I think you.
Yeah, I think also just realizing how much power y'all wield. I mean, you move a lot of money, to be frank. You move a lot of money, and being willing to call out, my money is not going where you told me it was going to go or where I want it to go, and holding that power as an industry that is on the up and coming, that we have seen explode since the legalization and on the state level, and really being mindful, of doing your own work around that, of doing your own work around what that means to hold that power and that responsibility, and then making sure that it's being followed through on. I love just how you said it, that it wasn't going where even it was set, even where it was originally stated within the law itself. And besides that was an incomplete statement. And now we know different, and we want it to go towards different levels of equity.
I was going to contribute something a little bit different. You're an industry that really relies on soil. And without healthy soil, your product can't be brought, out to the public. So I was going to say one way you can think of the work you do is to invest in regenerative agriculture, because that then has an incredible impact on all the workers in that realm, farm workers, forestry workers, and their health and the trauma that they experience from. And then here's the other connection. We were talking about defunding the police, but where my mind was going is defunding the industrial military complex, because the same chemicals that are used to kill soldiers and innocents in the battlefield are converted into pesticides and then sprayed on the soils and the foods that we eat, which can, I believe, and I think there's data to support it, by eating this poisoned food, it can traumatize all sorts of things, whether that be trauma to an organ from manifested as cancer, or even trauma to our emotional mental states, because these are endocrine disruptors and neurological disruptors that affect how we feel and how we perceive the world. So there's this deep, unsettling connection between the health of the land, the respect for the land, the respect for the workers, the respect for the things that come from the land, and then cutting off how a lot of that is, in our conventional ways of growing things, completely dependent in an unholy way on the military industrial complex and the chemicals that they produce. So we've got to get those chemicals out of the way we grow foods for medicinals and for plants, and particularly places where first foods are grown for our native and indigenous population.
Walter Wallace Jr. in Philadelphia has become the most recent example of how profound the need for behavioral health first response is in every city throughout North America. The Cahoots Act, which is hung up in Congress right now, probably won't see the light of day again until after January 21st, 2021, presents an opportunity for the issues around funding to be less of a concern, and for Medicaid to come in and be the primary funder for programs to get their start. So, as you all here in Oregon talk to your counterparts in other recreational states, encourage them to reach out to their elected officials, use your lobbying power to advocate for the Cahoots Act, because there is a public health emergency out there, and first response for behavioral health crises is falling to police, because there is no other system in place to respond in any sort of different way. And until we get these systems built, we're going to continue to see situations like what unfolded in Philadelphia on Monday night.
Well said, Tim. I've had goosebumps about 4,700 times throughout this conversation. Thank you all again for attending. It means so much to have people in your positions and as busy as you are participate in something that is kind of outside of your purview on most days. And I think that what's really important, and Anna can definitely speak to this as well, is that, our relationships with your organizations are just so important. And, to know that we do spend a lot of time talking about how it is that we're supporting your work. And also how we're getting that out, not only to our members, but, to all of the people that our businesses serve as well. Because, in addition to being a networking group, we have a reach that goes all over the state, in terms of bringing attention to our local community, but also in talking about the kind of broader scope of this work. So thank you so much for your time. It's so valuable and so valued. And also, we would love to see how you move forward. I think the idea of having a monthly conversation, I was just reading an article about, there was a town who all of the pastors used to get together and they would do this meeting about the people in their town. And, then all of this kind of infighting happened and they stopped having those meetings. And the result of that was that their communities were not served in the same ways, because where there was an interfaith effort, it had fallen away. And so each community was standing on its own. And so, to me, one of the best parts about this is that everybody that's doing this important work is in one place, able to contemplate what we can all do together. So again, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you all as well, and just also offer this piece of support from the cannabis industry. Sue, you brought up great points about the intention of Measure 91 and how cannabis was supposed to be funding and supporting really at the base level of services for drug and alcohol rehabilitation to just really being that bridge program to be able to provide funding and services that there wasn't funds for originally. And we have a lot of political action committees and people doing that work to bring that money to the places it was promised to go. And there are equity programs being built by incredible leaders in the space right now. And we will commit to keeping you posted on that, because that so directly affects the work that you do. But also, I'm so thrilled with this conversation to be a call to action for so many of the cannabis businesses that we have relationships with, and also cannabis businesses around the state, to see the work that's being done, to see where we can invest our dollars into the community as well. Because cannabis is a grassroots business structure from the beginning. It started as a grassroots structure, it's moved into a legal recreational space, and we also have a responsibility as legal recreational businesses to be putting our money into systems and programs that create equity and pay reparations for how disproportionately our success is not aligned with people who are still incarcerated and people who aren't able to benefit from this legal space. So just wanted to thank you all again and reaffirm our commitment to you all to be supporting you in the work that you do. This really is sort of a full circle mission that we all have together to continue to expand forward. And I'm just so thrilled that you all joined us this evening, and just thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us and for the work. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much, everyone. Just as we're signing off, this video will be available on YouTube, on Facebook, and we will be sharing across multiple platforms. And we hope that if you were not able to tune in for the entirety tonight, that you will in the future. This was a really unique and powerful panel, and thank you so much for joining us. So
also, before anyone leaves, on our website, we have donate buttons for each of your organizations. Yeah, Anna, that is true.
Yes.
And so we will continue to promote all of your work. And if there is a way, please, especially reach out to me, because philanthropy is kind of my thing. And I would love to hear about, things that your organization is participating in, whether that is, an ask, or whether that is a, hey, join us, or letting us know about a training that's going on, for our own employees, and also, to circulate widely. Our newsletter spreads that kind of information and has a pretty large reach. And so, having us in your speed dial is great, because we can help to promote and also continue to funnel donations. So the more that we talk about each other, the more that we're going to be able to do.
Well, if you don't mind if I do a quick promo, if there's a donate button, now is a particularly poignant moment to please donate to every single organization that you see on the panel right now. We are moving into the portion of the year where temperatures drop below freezing. We just had an early activation of our warming system, which is due to COVID, like everything else, deeply disrupted and wasn't even before COVID at all able to cover the population of people that are sleeping outside right now. So we need survival supplies, and we need a lot of them, and we need them very quickly. So
Mackenzie, can you give us some of the most popular ones?
what was that?
Can you tell us about some of the most popular things that we could be funneling your way?
Occupy Medical does have a Amazon wish list, which I think Whitebird also does. But space blankets, hand warmers, sleeping bags, tents, tarps, those are the big ones. We do have access to an incredible organization called Bombas, which provides us with just a lot of socks. But socks and gloves are also really helpful if you have someone who is just a crazy knitter and has been cooped up for COVID. This entire program has a bunch of hats that they need to donate. Now is a great time to do so.
You know, it's Oregon, it's going to be wet for the next 13 months, right? So non-cotton clothing, you know, right? Clothing that can keep folks warm even if it gets wet. That's what saves lives.
And for folks that are interested, we have a 2-hour it's a session for organizations that we have been making available. It's really around resilience and reconnection in stressful times. So it's a 2-hour session. We're available to provide that for organizations that would like to do some self-care and to get some relief and connectedness with one another. We're available. Just let us know. And we are working hard to keep those very accessible. So anybody want to support the scholarship fund for that, that's excellent. But also if you're interested in having us come or provide that to your organization, it's ready to go. And Whitebird is actually doing November 10th crisis de-escalation training. So if you go to our website, it's a 2 to 4:30 time slot, and it'll be by Zoom. So join us for that as well. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Please, as you continue to think of things that we can do to promote you, please send them our way. We'll make sure that they go out through all of our marketing channels. And we just so appreciate, again, what you've done for the community, for participating in this really important conversation about how we can move forward as a community, culturally, into the future. And yeah, this has been fantastic. And just thank you so much again. All right, everybody, have a good night, and we will be in touch soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.